Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the coolest features of Spring Boot, using the @profile annotation to create beans dynamically. In our last video, we explored how to inject different configuration values based on the active profile. Now, we're taking it one step further. Imagine having the power to create different beans depending on whether you're in development, testing, or production, tailoring your app's behavior to exactly what you need at that moment. That's what we're going to do today with Spring Boot's @profile annotation. Get ready, because we're about to unlock a whole new level of flexibility in our application. Let's jump right in and see how it's done. Alright, now let's dive into today's challenge. In this video, we're going to create a simple file storage service. Don't worry, I'm not going to write full-fledged file storage code. Instead, our service will simply return a message. We'll set up two versions of this service. Local file storage. This bean will be created when the local profile is active. Cloud file storage. This bean will be used when any other profile is active, for example, for cloud environments. Let's get started by creating a new interface named File Storage. Define a method called storeFile that returns a string. Now it's time to create our first concrete implementation of the file storage interface. Let's create a new class called Local File Storage. Now let's implement the file storage interface in our local file storage class. And override the storeFile method to provide our custom local storage message. Alright, now let's annotate our local file storage class with its service so that Spring Boot can recognize it as a service bean. Alright, now that we've created our bean, the next question is, how do we tell Spring to only instantiate this bean when the local profile is active? Spring Boot makes this super simple with the @profile annotation. This little gem lets you control when a bean gets created based on the active Spring profile. Alright, now it's time to tag our bean with the @profile annotation. Since we want this bean to be created only when the local profile is active, we're going to pass local as its value. Think of it like giving Spring Boot a clear instruction: only instantiate this bean if we're in the local environment. Alright everyone, now that we've nailed local file storage for our local profile, it's time to take things to the cloud. We're going to create a new class called Cloud File Storage. Implement the file storage interface. Just like we did with local file storage, we'll override the storeFile method here. In our Cloud File Storage implementation, this method will return a message indicating that the file is stored in the cloud. Annotate this class with its service so that Spring Boot can manage it as a service bean. Alright, now we need to create the Cloud File Storage bean for our dev, QA, and prod environments. We can actually pass multiple profile names in the @profile annotation, like @profile, dev, QA, prod, so that this bean is only created when one of those profiles is active. But here's the challenge: what happens if a new profile pops up later? That would mean updating your code every time you add a new environment. A more flexible approach might be to use a negation strategy, essentially saying, create this bean whenever the active profile is not local. This way, you cover all cases without having to list every possible profile. Alright, let's open up our Profile Demo Controller class. Now, we're going to inject our file storage dependency. The cool part here is that we don't need to use a qualifier. Spring Boot already knows which bean to create based on our active profile. So, when the local profile is active, it automatically instantiates our local file storage bean, and that's exactly what gets injected. Next, create a REST API endpoint that calls the file storage method. This endpoint will invoke our file storage service and return its message, so you can clearly see which bean is active based on the current profile. Alright, now let's set the active profile to local. Start the application. Alright, our application is up, and look at those logs. It's clearly showing that the local profile is active. Now, let's switch over to Postman and hit our new API endpoint. Check out my screen. We got the response storing file on local system. That's exactly what we set for the local profile. It's working perfectly. Alright, now let's switch things up. Change the profile to prod. And restart the application. Check out the logs. They confirm that the prod profile is active. Now, open Postman and hit our API endpoint once again. Look at that. The response now reads storing file on cloud. This shows that Spring Boot has smartly switched to our cloud-based bean based on the active profile. Isn't that awesome? It's the magic of Spring Profiles in action. Your application dynamically picks the right bean for each environment. No manual changes needed. Everything's working perfectly, and our app is now truly adaptable. Great job, everyone. Alright folks, that's a wrap on today's deep dive into Spring Profiles and dynamic bean creation. We learned how to create environment-specific beans using the @profile annotation, switch between local and cloud storage seamlessly, and configure your app without any manual hassle. It's all about making your Spring Boot application smarter and more adaptable to any environment. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.